again, thanks everyone for joining us for the latest installment of our Portent webinar series. My name is Colin Parker and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar, PPC for the manager who manages everything, with Mike Fitterer, who's our PPC team lead here at Portent. We would love it, as always, if you would join us on this webinar. There's a couple of ways you can do that. One is by asking your questions within the questions pane of GoToWebinar, and the other is by tweeting your questions using the hashtag PortentU. So that's #PortentU. And just so you all know, in case you miss out on any of today's webinar, you want to review it or share it with colleagues, don't worry, because we'll send out a follow-up email which will contain the link to this recorded webinar, a slide share link to the presentation slides, and any and all of the links that Mike will be referencing in this session. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mike. Hey Mike.
Hey Colin, thank you very much for the introduction. And as Colin mentioned, the title of my presentation today is PPC for the manager who manages everything. But first, I know there's a few individuals that are still trickling in, so I'm going to give you guys some random trivia. I'm sort of a random trivia buff, so I just found a few examples that I thought might be fun to talk about as people start to join the webinar today. Remember those AOL discs back in the day that you used as frisbees? Apparently that cost them $300 million to mail all of those lists. So I'm not sure if they got all their value out of it, but they sure did make great frisbees. Apparently you cannot snore and dream at the same time. Did you know that catfish are the only animals that naturally have an odd number of whiskers? I did not. In 1933, long time ago for most of us, Mickey Mouse received 800,000 fan letters. And my favorite, Americans and Canadians like to eat cereal apparently, 12 pounds a year in fact. I don't know if I eat that much, but I do enjoy cereal now and then. So now that we've gotten through all of that fun business, you're probably wondering who's talking right now. Well, my name is Mike Fitterer, as Colin alluded to, and I've been with Portent for 7 going on 8 years in October. My clients, and really Portent's eclectic group of clients, range from everything from tech, credit bureaus, travel, day planners for moms. And in my current role as the head of the PPC team, I have a sort of a 50-50 role in focusing on, first of all, making sure that our clients are hitting the key performance indicators that we set aside with both ourselves and the clients. And then I spend about 50% of my time managing the PPC team here at Portent. So what am I actually going to talk about? Well, I'm actually going to talk about a few personas today as far as who should actually care about PPC, why you should care about PPC, and we're looking primarily at numbers there, how understanding PPC will help you do your job, and I'm going to spend the greatest amount of the time today focusing on how you can improve your PPC efforts, and this will be tailored to the individual persona types that I will be covering. But first, a disclaimer. I'm only going to talk about Google AdWords today, and this is very, very calculated on my end. There's a number of reasons, but primarily Google is the top leader when it comes to the search market. Even today, although Bing's making up ground, 65% of searches run through Google. Google's also generally more sophisticated with their capabilities than any of the other platforms. And the nice thing as well is that just because I'm speaking about AdWords in general, a lot of this information is transferable. A lot of it can be done in Bing, Yahoo, Gemini, so on and so forth. So just because you're hearing it and how to do it on Google specifically, that doesn't mean that it doesn't translate. So let's start out with the 3 target segments that I'm going to cover today. And there's a lot of overlap here, but these 3 individual types are probably dealing with PPC on potentially a daily basis for a couple of them, but at bare minimum a weekly or monthly basis. Let's start with a small business owner. And full disclosure, this particular small business owner happens to be my dad. I chose his picture because I didn't think he'd get mad if I used him in a presentation. I didn't even tell him though, so I'll tell him after the fact. That'll probably be fine. But as a small business owner, you're responsible for all marketing. At a minimum, even if you're not doing the marketing yourself and you're outsourcing it to an agency, you need to really understand the ins and outs of the marketing efforts that they are undertaking for you. The next person is the online marketing manager, and you have my sympathy because you are probably managing a whole lot of different platforms. You're probably doing PPC, SEO, you might be doing design, development, simple website updates. A lot of that may be falling under your plate or on your plate, and you have your hands full to say the very least. And then we have the director or VP of marketing. And this director or VP of marketing just so happens to be our director or VP of marketing, Colin Parker. I didn't actually tell Colin that I was using his image in this presentation either, but because we work together and we've got a great relationship, I just assumed it would be fine.
Thanks for using my glamour shot, Mike.
And Colin pretty much looks the same. I think this picture may be a couple years old, but nonetheless, he's still that striking young fellow that we all know and love. But as a VP of marketing, this individual is in charge of guiding the marketing efforts for the entire organization. And most likely this person's probably managing a team, and that team will be the doers, the people that are in the weeds performing PPC optimization. You're potentially an SEO person, you might have an email team. This person is guiding those people in the daily job that they're doing as well. So let's get into why PPC actually matters for you specifically. Well, let's take a look at the numbers. Quite frankly, digital ad spend is growing on an annual basis, and it's not even a little bit of a growth. It's very substantial. If you look at 2014 ad spend, for example, there were $50 billion that went out in spend, and in 2013 that figure was $43 billion. So we're talking about a $7 billion growth between the 2 years, which translates to 16%. And all indications, all of the data that we've seen cycling in for 2015 so far has shown that that trend is going to continue and into 2016 and frankly indefinitely. Where is that money going? Well, maybe 50% of it overall is going into search. You have about 40% going into display, 25% into mobile, and then it's a bit of a mishmash into desktop and variations of that moving forward. But overall search is getting a substantial amount of that. The great thing about PPC is that it's quantifiable. We can determine how much value is being derived from PPC by having all of the numbers on hand. So with analytics, we know things like the cost per click, the total conversion volume, the cost per conversion, total click volume. That is all at our hands, assuming that all of the analytics are set up properly. And another great thing about PPC's timeliness is you can display relevant ads related to pushing your goods and services when it's trending. So those who know me know I'm a big soccer fan. And right now the Copa America, which is the South American Soccer Championship, I think it happens every 3 or 4 years, is actually underway. And so it's a trending topic in Google and in searches at the moment. So you could actually capitalize on this if you were, let's say, a soccer equipment seller online in the United States. Maybe you sell soccer cleats or jerseys, something along those lines. Well, if you have the cleats worn by Messi or Neymar or one of the big stars that's playing in the tournament, you can advertise that. And you might even want to have a 10% or 20% off incentive while the tournament is rolling in order to get people through the door and make sure they understand it's a limited time offer. You could even say, hey, for every game they win, you get another 5% off or something along those lines to sweeten the deal. And then once the tournament's over, you can pause those ads and be done with them. So the timeliness is massive. But it doesn't have to be limited to trending terms. Top positioning can be purchased, which is wonderful. Don't get me wrong, quality score is absolutely essential towards long-term PPC success. However, if you are a company and you have a new product release, if you're offering some type of new service line and no one's aware of it, but you know your target segment, you can get the keywords going, and as long as you are within the search engine guidelines, for the right price, it might not be cheap, but for the right price, you can pay for that visibility. You can get a ton of eyes on whatever your service offering may be, which is awesome. So let's actually talk about how PPC influences these three persona types. And let's not kid ourselves, PPC influences a lot more than these three persona types, but there's a ton of overlap, and this will really let us get granular into a number of areas on the paid front. Well, let's talk about my dad, the small business owner. Again, this person's responsible for all marketing, or at bare minimum must understand the marketing that's going into what his agency or that person's agency is providing. Well, as a small business owner, you're the person. You wear all the hats. So if you're doing this well, you can save money by running your own marketing efforts. And probably more important, your time is very valuable, and if you're good at running your own marketing efforts, you can save time through improved efficiency. And naturally, if you are outsourcing these efforts, you can make sure your agency is doing a good job as well. Online marketing manager, you wear all the hats. Remember, you have content, website updates, PPC, SEO. You're probably in some way, shape, or form involved in all of these facets of online marketing. Well, let's not kid ourselves. You are going to be pulled in a million directions. You need to balance your priorities. So the better you are at understanding and dissecting opportunities within the paid realm, and really anything you're focusing on, to be fair, the more effective you're going to be. As an organizational manager, you also will have goals and key performance indicators that you need to hit. These are probably agreed to by yourself and upper management. So you need to understand each of the segments that you're managing in order to make sure that you're getting to hit these goals on a regular and frequent basis, because you don't want the boss to be bothering you on a daily or weekly basis. That's not fun for anyone. Now, the VP of marketing, again, you're guiding the marketing for your organization, and you are probably the manager of some of these individuals who are responsible for executing on the marketing plan. Well, you basically need to identify and implement new opportunities. That's your first and foremost priority. But you also need to understand the roles and abilities on your team. And you probably need to understand if they're doing a good job or not. So in the next section, what I'm going to do is go through a few changes that you can make in order to get more control over your PPC efforts. Again, there will be plenty of overlap between the three persona types, so please pay attention to each one. And I will not just focus on Google AdWords. To be fair, I'll get into analytics a little bit as well. Let's start out with the small business owner. The first thing I want to cover is separating search and display ads. So I don't think I can actually talk about separating search and display ads fairly without covering what search and display network are. So the search network is where people who are using keywords to find what they're searching for will land on. These are the Google search results pages, or whatever the search engine may be. Again, we're focusing on Google specifically today. And in this scenario, what you're going to have is what is traditionally the online ad. It's text with a headline, you'll have a call to action, and you'll link to a page you want potential customers to visit. you can also go after people in need of your products and services. That's pretty much the primary benefit of the search network. Display, on the other hand, is when you have ads showing up on sites that are relevant for your target customer based on the keywords that are taken from your ad groups. But let's clarify, just because it's display, that doesn't mean that it has to be banner ads. You can also have text ads in the display network as well. The difference is, the customer is finding your ad via a website. They're going to click on the ad and go to the page that's linked to from the ad. So why would you actually separate search and display? Well, a lot of people don't realize that by default, Google automatically opts you into both. The thing that's important to note, though, is that the prices are different. Display is usually much cheaper, and that's because of the targeting differential. With search, you are showing your ads to people who are definitely looking for your services or products or something along those lines. So you have people in a buying mode. Whereas with display, you're simply showing your ad on a site that is in some way relevant to the keyword or keywords that you have selected. So in that case, you have a different mindset. An individual may not even be aware that your product or service exists, so you really have to tell more of a story. It's more of an awareness play on the display network. So in these cases, keywords and tight themes should be different because we're talking about a person in the different stage of the buying cycle. How do you do that? Well, it's really simple. You go to the All Campaigns page and hit the plus campaign button, and you have the option to set up a search network only or display network only campaign. But, in most cases, you probably have some existing campaigns. So if you have an existing campaign, the best practice is going to be set your existing campaign up for search only. And then what you're going to want to do is create a duplicate campaign for display. And that way you can have them separated out, and one will focus on search and one will focus on display only. You'll make different modifications over time and whatnot, but then you'll have a much more granular view at what's working, what isn't, and how to really optimize both of them on a separate basis. Geotargeting. So by default, Google targets the whole USA and Canada, but they actually allow you to target the country, the region, the city. You can even target by postal code. And the reality is that although most businesses would love to be relevant nationwide, a lot of businesses are highly geo-targeted, meaning they're really focused on a specific geographic area, maybe even a town, or if your town's big enough or your area is big enough, it might even be part of the town. So you're going to want to have ad copy and a landing environment that really reflects where you're primarily doing business. If you're a Seattle business, within your ad copy, you're probably going to want to say that, and your landing page might speak to something that's really specific to Seattle only, for example. So how do you set up geotargeting? Well, this is done on the campaign level. You go into an individual campaign and you simply click on the settings tab, and then from there you go into the locations area, and you can again set it up based on zip code. There's a lot of different geographic area factors that you can do. Next we have ad scheduling. So ad scheduling is setting days and times of when you want your ads to run. The reality is most businesses have times throughout the week when, frankly, customers are not actively looking for your goods or services. And in a lot of cases, it's probably weekends or overnight. Again, it totally varies depending on the business. But this is especially true for B2B businesses in what I've seen. So the goal with ad scheduling is preserving your spend for the times of the day and the days of the week when your customers are actively searching for your goods or services. How do you do this? Well, it's actually a twofold process. First, you need to collect the data. And you could start with day of the week or time of the day, but let's start with day of the week. So in order to get this information, you're actually going to go into your campaign settings, click on the dimensions option, click the view button, and then select day of the week. And it's very important that you select a nice range of data. If you're just selecting, by default, you're going to be shown the last 30 days. If you're just selecting that, that's not a true indication of how people are actually viewing your site on a daily basis. So it's more important to get maybe 6 months or even a year of data, especially if you don't have a whole lot of hits to your website, so you have a true indication of how people are interacting with your site and visiting your pages. So if you want to, you can even, you see the little arrow with the down button next to view change history, you can download this information, and then you're going to want to get the time of day data, which is hours of the day. You simply go into campaign settings, dimensions, click the view button, and select view hour of the day. So it's the exact same process, except once you're on the view button, there's a number of different options, and this one will be hour of the day. And again, you can hit the little download button and grab all of this. It will roll up into a nice little Excel spreadsheet. And also with hour of the day, I would recommend getting a large sample size if at all possible, so you have a true indication of which hours people are actually searching for your goods or services. Now that you have all this, why don't you marry the data, put it into a spreadsheet, and then from there you can analyze really what times of day and days of the week are most effective for you. And how are you going to analyze this? Well, okay, it depends on your business, but I think a very safe bet is always what are your top converting times of the day and top converting days of the week. When are people buying your products, or when are people hitting your contact form? Whatever your conversion may be, that's where I would start. And then also consider how much you're getting charged for that particular time of the day. That should be your secondary factor. The cheapest time or the cheapest charges are the best, and the most conversions are also the best. You want to put all that information together, and what you'll get out of that is what your ad schedule should be. Once you're ready to set up your ad schedule, go into campaign settings, ad schedule, and hit the plus ad schedule button. Let's talk about negative keywords. With every business, there are terms that you really don't want associated with your business. Repeatedly, terms like cheap and free do not convert well at all into actual paying customers. So usually there are terms surrounding those, but also a lot of businesses have really, I guess you could almost say, generic names, something like Acme. There are so many businesses that are named Acme this and that. That the problem is when someone is simply searching on an Acme business, you probably have really clouded search results with a lot of similarly named businesses that have absolutely nothing to do with what you do. So in the PPC realm, what you want to do is make sure that you're not throwing away money on searches that people are making that are actually trying to find these other businesses or trying to find free goods, products, and services. You want to create a list of terms that will ensure that you're not having your ads show up when people are performing these searches. And that's called the negative keywords list. The cool thing is that you can do the negative keywords list on an ad group level or a campaign level. And what's normally the case is if you set something on an ad group level, it will override what's done on the campaign level. There are exceptions, but that's how it works with the negative keyword list. And to do this, it's pretty simple. You just go into the primary campaigns, all campaigns page, and hit negative keywords. And that particular screen, you have the ability to set either at ad group or or campaign level. Location extensions and call extensions are next. Well, what are location extensions for starters? So if you have a brick and mortar business, these are awesome. That is basically telling the search engines, Google in this case, that you want the address of your brick and mortar business to show up in your ad text. So it takes up additional space relative to your competitors, and it's a nice clickable link, which also is very good for catching the consumer's eye. And you can drive people to your brick and mortar business. In this case, what will happen if you have multiple businesses is that the business that is closest to the IP address that someone is searching for will be the one that gets the nod to actually show up in the ad search results. To implement this, there's actually two ways you can do this. You can go to All Campaigns page, click on the Ad Extensions, and you change the view box to Location Extensions, and click on the plus extension box to get started. But if you have many businesses, this is not all that efficient because this is a manual process. So what I would recommend doing in that case is linking it up to your Google Places account. To do that, you're going to go to View Location Extensions, you'll choose Upgraded from the menu, and then you'll be prompted to link up with your Google My Business account, assuming that you have one. But then it's an automatic process and you don't have to manually import that data. What about call extensions? Well, this is pretty much a mobile-specific feature, but what you have is a click-to-call button that shows up in your ads. This is really nice because, as we all know, it is a total pain to actually copy and paste a phone number or try and remember a phone number when you're searching on your mobile device of a business that you're trying to call. Why not just have a nice little button that you can click? And the other thing that this does is it takes up more ad space and attention relative to your competitors. So how do you do that? Well, it's very simple. Also in the same location, you're going to go into All Campaigns, Ad Extensions, Call Extensions, and hit the plus extension button. All right, let's migrate on to ideas for the online marketing managers, the managers that manage everything. Starting with campaign and ad group structure. Campaign and ad group structure should not be understated. You have to think of them in terms of a hierarchical structure. So the campaign is always the overriding theme. If we were to take some examples, let's take women's running shoes or new Volvo cars. Those would be your campaigns. That's the primary theme. Then on the ad group level, you will have more granular categories that really belong under this primary campaign. So if we're using our women's running shoes example, you would have something like women's Adidas running shoes or women's Asics running shoes. If we're using our car example, and that was new Volvo cars, it's going to be something like the actual car model numbers. So you might have a Volvo S40 or Volvo S60, which are specific model numbers in your ad group. It's really important to have a great campaign structure because if you don't, you're going to be cannibalizing yourself. If you have a lot of keywords in various campaigns, those keywords and campaigns are basically, and ad groups I should say, are really competing against one another when a search happens. So you have much less control over what shows up, and probably the one that you want to show up might not necessarily show up. So targeting the keyword based on match type is really valuable in this case because it reduces the amount of cannibalization that you have, and it allows for a much better structure that will actually save you time and likely money in the long run. So here is a potential structure that we use in many cases. Again, the structure of your campaigns is going to totally vary depending on your particular business needs. But I can say that a really positive structure and overlapping structure that works in many cases is what I have shown here. This is an example of a given campaign, and what you have is a number of ad groups. But rather than having all of these match types in one ad group, you split them out to individual ad groups. So for that one ad group, you'll actually end up with 3 ad groups: a broad ad group, a phrase ad group, and an exact match ad group. And what's really crucial is making sure that for the broad and phrase match ad groups, you have exact match negative keywords running, so that when people are pulling ads from those particular when people are pulling ads from those particular ad groups, the exact match is not getting cannibalized. This helps ensure that the inbound queries will map to and trigger the most stringent match type available. And it's really nice because you should have an improvement in quality score because you have all of these defined different areas. You have your bases really well covered, but you're not cannibalizing each other. And in the long run, that's probably going to save you on your cost per click. Mobile bid modifiers is what I want to talk about next. Previously, Google had mobile and desktop bidding separated. This was great because mobile auctions and desktop auctions are totally different. You have different types of searches. Individuals are interested in different things at a given time. Unfortunately, maybe a year ago or so, Google wised up to this, and now by default, when you are bidding on Google, you're bidding on tablet, you're bidding on mobile, and you are bidding on desktop. But frankly, that is not very good because for a business, mobile can be very important or not important at all. If you're an e-commerce provider, or if you need to provide some type of price comparison information, or if you have a brick and mortar store, you probably find mobile to be extremely important in driving customers to your site or store location. However, if you're a B2B, especially if you have a complicated purchase process or a more technical product, you might not have the same necessity for mobile. So mobile bid modifiers actually help you control how much you're bidding on mobile specifically, because the need for mobile scales entirely depending on how important it is to your business. How do you implement mobile bid modifiers? Well, you browse to the selected campaign or ad group, you hit settings, devices, and then mobile devices with full browsers. This is really important that you get it right because, for example, a minus 90% bid reduces your bid by 90%. So it's going to be 10% of the original bid. Whereas if you were to hit plus 300%, you're actually increasing your original bid by 300% for mobile. I don't know why you would ever do that. You're probably going to decrease your bid for mobile because mobile is normally cheaper and not as competitive. But if you needed to raise the bid, that's how you do it. It's very important with mobile that you realize that there is a catch. So normally, as with other things, ad group level will override what's done on the campaign level. However, if you set your campaign to have a minus 100 mobile bid, that means you do not want mobile at all to be bid upon in that campaign. That will override what's done on the ad group level, but only if it's done on a minus 100 bid. Now let's talk about remarketing. Remarketing is awesome. It lets you create an audience based on previous site visits. So you could actually create an audience based on a page someone visited, or even in the checkout process. If they get to a certain point, you can create audience based on that. And this is really nice because these people have already shown an interest in you in some way, shape, or form. So you can improve conversion rates substantially by targeting these individuals and getting them through the door. And say you're an e-commerce provider, if you provide some type of incentive, say, hey, 10% if you check out now, to the people that you're remarketing to, that could probably sweeten your conversion rates even further. And let's not forget that remarketing is done on the display side, and as I alluded to previously, display is generally cheaper than search. So to set that up, the best way is actually through Google Analytics. So you're going to go into Analytics, and go to the admin section. That'll be in your top left corner, and you'll scroll under the property section and click on remarketing and go to new audience. Now, to be fair, you can also do this in AdWords, but it's kind of frustrating because you have to drop a pixel on the page that you want to use for remarketing. It's just not as dynamic. So I suggest, if at all possible, do it through Google Analytics. Site link extensions and call out extensions. So site link extensions allow you to pick specific pages on your website to be linked to under the text of your ads. These are great because they're directly linking to popular or high converting sections on your website. You get full analytics information as well, so you know how they're performing. They're really easy to switch out. And if you have a sale or incentive for a limited time and you want to also include that within your ad text, you can totally do that in the site link extensions, and you can schedule it so that the sale or incentive is only showing as long as you want it to show, and then it will be pulled once that deal is no longer relevant. To do that, you go into the campaign or ad group level. Again, ad groups will override the campaign level, and they are 25 characters per site link max, but the link text that you're actually seeing must be 12 or fewer characters, and you'll have 20 site links per ad group. To do this, all campaigns, the all campaigns page again, go into ad extensions, site link extensions, and hit the plus extension box. Call out extensions. So these are great because they're additional text that shows with your search ads, and they highlight specific information that could be compelling for a potential customer. Things like free shipping, if you have a price match guarantee, 24/7 support, all of those things are great for call out extensions because it's just a little blurb of text that sort of builds in that trust factor for potential customers. And it helps improve your ads appeal, and it also takes up more space relative to competitors. To do these, all campaigns again, add extensions, call out extensions, and hit the plus extension box. It's important to note that these are limited to 25 characters, but you really want to be succinct and to the point with them, and you don't want to really clog the way your ad looks. So a best practice would be 12 to 15 characters max, and create a minimum of 4 call outs at each level. So now I'm going to get into ideas for marketing executives. Starting with assisted conversions. The biggest, or one of the biggest negatives that I've seen, really busy, I don't think it's industry specific, but on many levels, is a lot of people get focused on the marketing medium that actually drives the last conversion, or the conversion in the marketing process. But what assisted conversions do is they allow you to show conversions and ad revenue based on a particular medium that wasn't necessarily the last click or last step in the process, but it was involved in the process. So a great example of this, and a very common example in fact, would be if you have an individual searching for your goods or products, they'll click on one of your paid ads. They'll browse around your site. They'll gather information. Then they'll leave. They'll probably go look at competitor sites. They'll, go have some breakfast. They'll come back eventually, and that individual, having already decided based on your competitors or what else is out there in the industry that you are the best, already knows your name, knows your product, and they'll probably go directly to your site or type in a Google search, a branded search, and go to your site that way and convert. But PPC had an integral part in this particular process. And it's very, very important to note before I get into where to see assisted conversions is that you must have conversion tracking set up in Google Analytics in order for this to show up. I should say set up correctly. So to do that, it's really simple. Once you're in Google Analytics, you're going to scroll all the way just about to the bottom on the left side where you have the navigation area, and it's called multi-channel funnels. And that's where you can actually see the data of how a particular channel is assisting in the end conversion process. The other thing that's worthy to note, and along the same lines, is attribution modeling. Again, as I'm discussing over and over again, last step in the conversion is important, but it's just not indicative of how the buying cycle works these days. With Google Analytics, though, you can actually assign importance to the different steps in the buying cycle, and you can even compare models. You can use multiple models, many businesses do. By default, in Google Analytics, there are 7 different purchasing models, and you can even create your own custom models. Let's talk about 3 of the most popular ones. Last interaction is the most common model used, and it is also the default model used in Google Analytics. But I don't like it that much because it doesn't give you a true indication of how the entire marketing process played out when a conversion occurred. So time decay is a little more interesting for me because it increases with importance as someone gets closer towards the end of the buying cycle. The more research they do, the more important an individual step becomes. Position-based is also interesting because people are always wondering, well, how do you hear? How are people finding out about our business? So this particular model shows a very strong support for the first interaction that someone may have with you, and then also the last interaction, because that's the conversion. That's where you're making your money or getting someone into the purchasing process. I think it's important to note that there is no right attribution model, but don't just rely on last conversion. There are so many things that you can derive by focusing on the entire process as opposed to just the end process. And awareness and new opportunities. Let's not kid ourselves, search engines make money because people click on ads. That's their primary source of revenue, and as a result, the search engines pay a ton of attention to what the people who are marketers are asking for, and they're constantly releasing new features and updates that make our jobs more sophisticated and easier at the same time. As someone who is a marketing executive, pretty much your primary responsibility is identifying new opportunities that are coming along and pushing your team towards working on these new opportunities and achieving the key performance indicators that you are setting aside. So now it's time to toot on Portent's horn a little bit, because I think the best way, frankly, to stay on top of industry publications is or industry updates is to get involved in publications. And what I would do is I recommend setting yourself an alert so that maybe 15 minutes a day you're scouring through new blog posts, new releases, and what's really coming out within the industry. And let's start with Portent. We have a blog here that focuses on all things internet marketing. So not only are we looking at PPC, but we cover content, design, development, analytics, the full gamut. And we also have an email list. So I recommend following us, and yes, I understand that's self-serving. The PPC Hero blog is another great one, and they have an email list. And WordStream also has a great blog and email list. If you were to check into all 3 of these on a regular basis and get involved in the email list, I guarantee you would learn a ton and have a ton of value to take towards your team in order to try and get them to implement some positive changes. So with that, I thank you all very much for listening today, and I think we'll open it up for questions, right, Colin?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. That was extremely informative. So now don't forget all the resources that Mike talked through will be available on the Portent blog as well as in our follow-up email. So in opening it up for questions, we've got a few good ones already. Don't forget that if you've got any more questions for Mike, you can ask those via the questions pane and GoToWebinar or on Twitter via the hashtag PortentU, and I saw we had a couple of those come in. So to start, Steve asks, Would you ever recommend that someone newly managing a team of folks doing SEM or PPC get AdWords certified themselves? Or is it more useful for a manager to do the Google Analytics certification, for example, first?
That is a great question. I would focus on Google Analytics because getting AdWords certified really means that you are down in the weeds and you are implementing the actual strategy. So from an AdWords perspective, it's most important to simply understand what is possible, and then you can delegate that potential opportunity to whoever may be actually doing it. However, if you're analytics certified, you can parse data in all kinds of fun ways. If you have a true understanding of analytics, you can really look at what's working and what isn't, and then make a lot of your decisions in an educated fashion and start delegating to the team in that sense.
That's great. I think that's probably a question that a lot of folks share as far as prioritizing where you go to get a little taste of the sea of information that's out there. Okay, similar note, Rebecca asks for an executive that's a couple of steps removed and not wanting to necessarily micromanage the process, since we cover, I think, a lot of good, specific, actionable things here. Do you think it's possible to build a dashboard that tells you whether your SEM team is leaving money on the table? So where do you come down on dashboards versus hands-on or even spot checks? And I think that's a great question as far as not wanting to micromanage, but also knowing when to, let's say, get your team some help.
I think that actually ties in really well to the previous question, in that if you truly understand analytics, you can build your own dashboard. And if you don't, you can have someone do it for you. I actually think a dashboard is a very valuable tool because as an exec, your time is torn between all types of different responsibilities. You need information fast, and you need to be able to dissect that information quickly and effectively. So having a dashboard lets you have information and be able to make decisions at maybe 1-2 clicks away, as opposed to having to get really granular in there. So I'm very pro dashboard. And if you don't know how to do that, there are plenty. Portent has an analytics team, for example. We build dashboards for clients all the time. If you have an internal analytics wizard, I'm sure that individual would also be able to build you a dashboard.
I think that's great, but and I'll push you actually a little bit, Mike. So the other part of that question was when and where and apologies if I'm misinterpreting this, but I heard, when and where do dashboards kind of stop, and where do you have to actually have a separate set of eyes or somebody with knowledge of AdWords kind of get in and get beyond the dashboard?
So dashboards are very effective if you are just simply looking at historical data over time. If you just need to have a little bit of a complex report, something that's not easily readily available for dissection in analytics, a dashboard is where you can just have it at a click away. But what dashboards don't provide is the actual process to get there. So within analytics, or within AdWords specifically, the dashboard doesn't tell you how to do that work. So I think you have to, at some point, rely on your team in order to effectively have whatever you're seeing built out and get into the weeds and make that decision.
I think that's a great place to leave that. So we've got some great questions here from Steyer Associates. I think that's going to be Caitlin over there. Caitlin, I saw your question about potentially covering LinkedIn PPC. I think that's actually probably broad enough and interesting enough that we would do a whole separate session on it. So apologies we weren't able to get into a whole lot of that today. Mike, is that something you want to cover quickly? Just some of the nuanced differences?
Sure. Yeah, so LinkedIn is a very interesting segment, and especially if you are responsible for recruiting people, LinkedIn is probably the way to go. Unfortunately, if you're looking at LinkedIn on a B2B basis, or if you're looking at it to purely drive revenue, LinkedIn is not going to be the best segment because a lot of those ads are really pushed down to the bottom these days. And the people on LinkedIn have a mindset of trying to build a community, interact, and a lot of them are searching for employment. So Steyr, as a company that focuses on recruiting, LinkedIn is a great place to build, but I would not focus solely on LinkedIn.
I think that's great, and obviously a ton more to cover there as far as just different use cases. Okay, let's see. So next question up. Ryan asks, how often should you get an outside set of eyes on your PPC campaigns to make sure things are running as well as they could? Quarterly, ? Yearly. And I think that's actually a pretty good segue as well. I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule, Mike, that you propose, or if that's just kind of a condition-based when you would look.
That's a great question as well. I would call it more of an intuition-based decision. Now, think about the size of your account and complexity. If you have a massive account, and it's, we're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in ad spend on a given month basis, then you're probably going to want to have someone looking at it more frequently because you have a lot of movable parts underway. I would almost say monthly in that case, at minimum quarterly. If you have a really simple account where you're just spending a few hundreds of dollars a month or even a couple $1,000s, frankly, once every 6 months or even once a year will probably fully cover what you're doing.
That's great. So let's do another question from Twitter. And I think this is Caitlin again asks, so as a marketing manager for a small business, is it better to have more broader campaigns or fewer that are carefully curated regularly?
That's also a great question. I would say it really depends on the particular business, but what I would recommend in any case when you have a limited spend is to try and get as granular as possible. Especially with exact match, if at all possible. Think about what types of terms people are using to find you, and you can use the AdWords keywords tool. There's a ton of other awesome keywords tools that you can use to kind of figure out what people might be using if you don't have a very good indication. But the more granular you can be and longer tail, the more specific you are in using terms that people will actually be using to find what they're looking for when it pertains to your good or service. If you're using broad-based type terms, you're going to get a lot more traffic, but you're going to be paying for less quality. Now, again, if you're a larger business, you want more traffic. You probably want that volume, and your conversion rate will be lower, but at the same time, you will have you won't have that level of granularity that a smaller business with fewer funds will require.
I think that's great. That's a great question. Thanks again for that one. Okay, I think we've got time for one final question, and I'm selfishly saving one of my favorites for last here. So Alexander asks, I get pitched a lot by shops offering to audit my current agency's work. So it sounds like Alexander is actually working with an agency. I've said yes a couple of times over the years, but I'm never really sure if they're finding problems that are real or exaggerating the impact of small things, like using site extensions on every single ad. And Mike, you talked to site extensions, that's perfect. Alexander asks, any advice on how to evaluate that advice or those changes?
That's also a very good question. What I would recommend is actually taking it back to key performance indicators. In PPC, we can never accurately predict fully how much money you will make from something, but what we can say is, well, we expect it to impact you in this way, shape, or form. So the questions I would ask in that particular scenario is, well, okay, you want to do this change, how do you expect it to impact my bottom line? Is this it? And they're not going to be able to give you exact numbers, but what you can ask for is this a high, medium, or low type priority change? Meaning if it's a high priority change, it could have a substantial impact on your bottom line, because as an operator, that's what you care about. You care about revenue and leads in the door.
That's a perfect tie-up for today's session. Okay, guys, thank you so much for all of the fantastic questions. We'll wrap it up here since we're right at the hour. I'll give the exclusive teaser for our next webinar. So please do join us for our July webinar. We're going to take a look at a pretty wild application of the geolocation function in Google Analytics. Portent's analytics architect, Michael Wiegand, who you guys have heard from in the past, is going to show us how you can use Google Analytics to build a neighborhood-level living map of exactly where your website visitors and prospective customers are. And that's going to be at the exact moment they access your content. I've actually seen this tool. It's extremely powerful if you have a physical store or a chain of stores, or even if you're a publisher that serves that kind of business and you need to show effectively your inventory. The other option is the other application is if you do any sort of outdoor media buying and want to map the immediate offline to online impact. So I hope you guys will join us for that. You'll be able to sign up for that on our Facebook page as well as our site. If you do the Facebook page, it is just facebook.com/portent.marketing. All right, guys, thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.